Okay, guys, in this training, we're going to go through effective reps, exercise execution, and getting the most from every single session in the gym. We maximise our efforts and our results by focusing on skill, execution, and intent, not just effort, not just going in there trying to sweat, but we're going in there with a deliberate purpose. Then, if we look at our, just to recap on our overarching principles in terms of our application in the gym, skill acquisition before intensity. We have to get really good at something first before we start adding further complexities into it. We're going to train close to failure once we're there because we know that from an efficiency standpoint, the last 5 repetitions before failure are the ones that contribute the most towards changing your physique. Those are the repetitions that really, really count. The more exposure to those repetitions that we can get, the more growth we're going to get from that session. Then once we have that high degree of effort, we know that we can probably come back a little bit on the volume because volume and intensity are inversely proportional. So when we first start and we know that intensity is going to be pretty low because we're still trying to get good at something and we're trying to get good at something as well, we need more practice, so we need more volume. As we are pretty good at the exercise and we know that we're starting to take these sets pretty well close to failure, then we can start to come back a little bit on the amount of volume that we're doing, and then we can cycle through that in phases as well. And of course, it's a case by case approach. Exercise selection, intensity is based on experience, recoverability, joint health, pre-existing injuries. I have overarching principles what I like to consider in terms of program design, exercise execution, but it's on a case by case basis. If you're carrying a pre-existing injury, then you're not going to be made to do something that's going to aggravate that injury, but it is on you to fully communicate those things to me as well, and as soon as something arises. So I'll quickly go over this. Chris Beardsley's effective reps model basically states that the last 5 reps are the ones that really contribute towards changing your physique. Why does that happen? Well, with the last 5 repetitions, we get full motor unit recruitment and we also get a high degree of mechanical tension. The 2 things that we need in order for us to have the perfect conditions for maximal muscle growth. Okay, now maximal muscle growth doesn't mean you're going to get absolutely jacked from nowhere. At the end of the day, without the raw materials that you're providing, enough building blocks, you can't build a house with no materials. So without those raw materials, you're never going to be able to do it. So that is obviously another consideration as well, and maybe something a side tangent, but from the pure stimulus perspective is what we're looking at here. Now, that perfect recipe, it sounds maybe a bit confusing. Motor unit recruitment, mechanical tension, what we're talking about here. Look, you can tell pretty quickly where that is. We've got a high degree of effort, and we can clearly see an involuntary slowing of the repetition speed, meaning you're trying to press up as fast as you can or with the same rate as which you were on your first couple of reps, but there is a noticeable decrease in that rep speed. You can't push it up as fast as you could previously. That is a pretty good indicator that, hey, we're in the zone, this is where we want to be. These repetitions are the ones that count, and make sure that we're focusing even more so on exercise execution here, which is the opposite in terms of what you would normally see or typically see in a gym. You see the repetitions, or you see people getting closer to failure, getting perceivably harder, and then people shorten the range of motion, speed up the repetitions, just don't control the reps whatsoever. They're just trying to get it over and done with. Well, hang on a minute. These last 5 repetitions are the ones that count the most. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever that we would try and speed those ones up. Like we've spent our whole working sets or warm-up sets and half of our working set getting to this point. We need to make sure that we're there focusing on getting the absolute most from these reps. Remember, the ones that count the most. Now, I've got some examples of what this looks like as well, okay, so you can actually see it live and see what I'm actually talking about here. Okay, so this is me going for a working set on the hack squat, okay? So nice, slow and controlled, focusing on exercise execution first and foremost, trying to get the most from the least, thinking about the eccentric 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 1 second pause, up we come. Maybe could add a little pause in there. But we can see it's definitely slow and controlled. There's definitely, there's nothing moving that way apart from my muscles, my musculature is moving that muscles. There's no collision, there's no momentum that's taking hold here. Okay, look, now we're starting to see that repetition speed, and like there's definitely maximal intent, but look how fast I'm trying to come up as fast as I can, but there's a bit of a grind coming along here, and then watch as this is coming along, grinding again, and involuntary slowing of the rep speed. I'm not trying to slow that down, I'm trying to move this weight as quickly as I can. It's just fatigue that is coming along for the ride here, and then that's the last rep of the set. So that's your exercises don't necessarily have to be like that right now, depending on where you are, but that should be the objective. for you to get somewhere onto your version of that, because that is a highly stimulating, highly effective set of hack squats, for example, and that could be on a goblet squat or whatever it is, like any kind of exercise. The principles are the exact same. Here I've got a chest supported row as well, so we'll just run through the exact same thing here. Again, slow and controlled. It's me that's moving the weight here. There's nothing else that's going on. There's no momentum. There's not me dropping it out the bottom and just bouncing straight back. I'm getting the absolute most from every single repetition here. Now, if you remember the exercise tempo video as well, we're looking at trying to get the absolute most from every single repetition, and that is the intent here. Try and go again. What can I get? Can I get there? Cool. That's me just doing what I can. This is a safe movement. I can afford to take that all the way to failure, because what's worst case scenario, what's going to happen? I'm just going to drop that weight. I'm just going to let go of those handles. If I can't move it all the way, I'll just lower it straight back down. There's nothing inherently unsafe there. Very stable position. I've got a pad here to brace against. Like, there's not too much that can go wrong there at all. Same with the hack squat. I'm leaning against a back pad, a backrest. You know, even if I get to the bottom and I can't get back up, I can just crawl out of the bottom. A little bit embarrassing, pull the weights off and re-rack it, but at the end of the day, completely safe. Now, for the hack squat, if I was doing something like a barbell back squat, I'm not going to take it all the way to failure, because now we've got the risk reward thing comes into it. Remember, everything is through the lens of completing repetitions with really, really good form. And that the fact is, for barbell back squats, you're going to have to stop a little bit sooner. You wouldn't be able to get a real grinder like that. You could, but you would have to be at a pretty high skill level before you'd be ready to incorporate something like that. So, you know, deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, things like that, where there's a little bit more risk involved, you would just stay a rep or two back from what I've kind of displayed here. Same thing, leg press, nothing to worry about here at all. Like, at the end of the day, if I can't get this weight all the way up, what happens? It rests on the kind of rack at the bottom here. I'll just have to kind of shuffle my weight out of the weight out of the seat, and then I just take the plates off and fucking rack it. Like, there's not, I can afford to take this all the way, slowing of the repetition speed now. Like, it's not, that plate is not moving at the same rate at which it was when I first started. If you can see, I'm trying to move. If you're not seeing any of these grinding reps when you're training, when you're going through your session, you're not training hard enough, to be frank. Okay, once you've got that skill execution, that exercise execution nailed on, like we said, you need to push the intensity, and that's where you're going to find the progressions are, where you've been going 10 10 and 10. That's the difference between going 10 10 and 10 and going 12 11 10, something like that, as you're pushing yourself a little bit harder, or even just making those increases. Like, every single session you should be looking for a progression. If it isn't a progression in load or repetitions, it should be a progression on technique. Did I execute it at a higher level? Did I feel the target muscles working harder? Something of that ilk, but there has to be a progression in every single session in order for you to get the most from what you're doing in the gym.